Get ready to hunt for some weird stone. In today's video, we restore a box of dusty, damaged original Mordheim terrain pieces and mix them with some new in the box broken city buildings to create a shattered cityscape for fantasy skirmish games like Mordheim or Frostgrave. Well, hi folks, and welcome to the channel. I'm Lee, your old hammered host. So it is currently the middle of October, which means where we are, we could get the first snowfall of the season anytime. But we've been fortunate that the weather is still going to be good for a few days, so we are rushing around trying to get our household chores done and also trying to finish up any terrain pieces and other projects that might require some gluing or priming outside. And that includes this collection of original Mordheim terrain pieces that are dusty and broken and in desperate need of some TLC. And they have been languishing in a cardboard box for a couple of years at least. And so I finally got off my butt and said, this is the time. We're going to go ahead and get them restored and mix them with some other terrain pieces, some new in the box ones we got from Green Stuff World, and try to get these guys on the table. So that is the project for today. So I got this box of stuff from either Craigslist or eBay, I can't quite remember, but it wasn't terribly expensive because the box is kind of damaged and the terrain pieces have already been built. And they're kind of damaged too, though if we manage to restore them, hopefully we can get them looking something like this. Now, I'm not expecting to get everything back to 100% pristine condition. It is cardstock after all, and it's at least 20 years old. But if we can salvage 60 to 80% of the buildings and get it back on the table, we'll consider that a victory. Now, since you're probably wondering, this is not a complete Mordheim box set. If it was, it'd be very expensive. But there are a few things in here. We have some sprues with a few bits left on them and some cardstock terrain sheets with a few unpunched pieces. I think these are like bridges and freestanding wall sections and things like that. Here's a closer look at one of the sprues, and as you can see, there are some heads and some arms and some other pieces on there. So yeah, these will be welcome additions to the bits box. Now, one of the things the box did include is this Mordheim starter guide here, which covers some of the basic rules and also provides assembly instructions for both the miniatures and the terrain pieces, which is going to be pretty handy as we try to piece everything back together. I actually have a pristine copy of this booklet that we got with our complete Mordheim box set, but I'm going to refer to this rumpled copy here during this project just in case I accidentally glue it to my fingers. It won't be quite the same tragedy. So even though we waited to the end of the season to work on this project, I thankfully did do a little prep work earlier in the summer by taking these MDF rectangles and priming them with MDF terrain primer. And my thought is we're going to use these as bases for the cardstock Mordheim terrain and give those cardstock buildings a little more support. Now, since this project is going to involve plastic and cardstock and MDF, I was a little unsure what adhesive to use. And this was recommended to me by some folks from one of the Facebook terrain building pages. So we're going to try it out and see what happens. Now, since we like our bases to have kind of a flagstone pattern, I picked up one of these Stampers Anonymous stone stencils on Amazon for about $9, as well as some cheap crafting paint from Walmart. These are some cheap acrylics. And Lynn is going to use the stencil, the paints, and a foam brush to sort of dab on a flagstone pattern to represent the flagstone floors and alleyways and sidewalks we imagine you might find on the mean streets of Mordheim. And while she's doing that, I'm going to break out the duster and try to get some of the dust off of the Mordheim buildings. As you can see, the dust has accumulated quite a bit over the decades. And also, all the buildings are suffering from some level of deferred maintenance. And here Lynn is, dabbing on some of the black and the gray and the white using that cheap sponge. And we have to admit, we were both kind of surprised with the results. They turned out a lot better than we thought they would. The only challenge, and it's a minor one, is going to be lining up the stencil to catch the rest of the MDF, since the stencil wasn't big enough to hit the whole thing in one pass. Now that the buildings are somewhat dusted off, it's time to assess the damage and start making plans for some repairs. None of the buildings are currently up to code, but fortunately most of the repairs can be accomplished with a little glue, I think. And fortunately for us, many of our missing doors and windows and wall sections appear to be in the bottom of the box, so we can fish those out as needed. Meanwhile, Lynn has finished her work on the flagstone bases. They didn't take her very long at all. She even went in with a brush and touched up any areas where the stencil didn't line up exactly right, and on most of them, you can't even tell where that seam is. Then, in the waning hours of the afternoon, I spray the bases with some clear coat and set them to dry in the dwindling sunlight. On day 2, it's time to start making some repairs in earnest. Some of these smaller corner structures didn't need much at all. I just had to glue in missing doors and/or windows. Other structures, however, needed a bit more help. I think the meteor must have hit this building pretty hard. Fortunately, we were able to restore structural integrity to most of the buildings using glue and some strategically placed rubber bands. Let's see how those buildings are going to look on our snazzy new bases, and yeah, I think we're in business. So here is what the assembled Mordheim terrain set was supposed to look like back in the day, and here's what we were able to salvage, which is actually most of it. So I'm not unhappy with that at all, because a lot of these sets probably ended up in the dumpster once they hit a certain point of disrepair. And here are some additional broken pieces that I haven't quite messed with yet. I think some of these are probably from the Blood on the Streets Mordheim terrain expansion, which is separate from the original box set. So to round out our classic Mordheim terrain, we're going to build out this Broken City terrain set from Green Stuff World. I checked on their website today. It is still available, and in fact, it is even on sale. And as you can see, it has a very Mordheim type vibe to it. So I think these buildings and our original buildings are going to sync up pretty well. Like the Mordheim buildings, the Broken City structures are cardstock, but the material is quite a bit thicker and there are no plastic connector pieces. Everything just kind of fits together and snaps in place, so if we need glue at all, it'll probably be PVA. Here is a look at the unpunched sheets, and fortunately all the parts are well identified with numbers and letters, which should help speed up construction considerably. Here is a look at one of the completed buildings. This only took Lynn a few minutes to put together because everything just kind of fits into place. Here's another Broken City building, and as you can see, the aesthetics are very similar to what you might find in the classic Mordheim buildings. So I think we're going to be able to sort of integrate these two sets together and create a large ruined cityscape without anything looking out of place. Okay, so Lynn has finished constructing all the ruined city buildings, and that didn't take her very long at all. I have glued them to some of our flagstone bases, and now we're going to mix them together with some of our old Mordheim buildings and put them on a tabletop and see how they look. All right, folks, welcome to the post-meteor strike city of Mordheim, or perhaps it is the recently thawed city of Frostgrave. Whichever it is, it seems like the perfect place for adventurers to find treasure, glory, or perhaps a gruesome death. If I do say so myself, I think the two terrain sets work together really well, despite the fact that the Mordheim set is probably 20 years older than the Green Stuff World Broken City set. And since the two sets are similar in style and scale, but not identical, combining them helps create a more varied cityscape, I think. I'm also quite chuffed with how our flagstone bases turned out. They kind of tie everything together. So kudos to Lynn and her faux finishing technique there. Okay, folks, that is a wrap on our great Mordheim terrain restoration project. I'm so glad we got that done, because now that box of dusty terrain won't be haunting me all winter long. Thank you very much for stopping by. As always, we hope you enjoyed today's video. We'll be back soon with some more tabletop wargaming stuff. But until then, take care of yourselves, and we'll catch you next time.